Hey guys, tonight we're settling in with the cup of something warm, a blanket that's probably overdue for a wash, and a story that drifts somewhere between quiet tragedy and light familial chaos. So go ahead and dim the lights, soften your breathing a little, and let the gentle hum of yet another dysfunctional family carry you off towards sleep. Because tonight, we begin with the House of Heart. Not an actual monarchy, of course, though they do behave like one, and not a glamorous one either. More like the kind of monarchy where everyone fights over heirlooms from a 1970s ranch house, and someone always shows up late with iced coffee and absolutely no remorse. But, as with most dynasties, this story begins not with the favorite child, but with the one who learned to disappear so the family machine kept running without complaint. Her name is Evelyn Hart. And Evelyn always played the role of the reliable daughter, the one who didn't cause trouble, didn't demand attention, didn't break down dramatically in the hallway for an audience. She grew up believing that stillness equaled peace, that silence equaled gratitude, and that needing less made her easier to keep around, which, in her particular family ecosystem, wasn't entirely wrong. Because in the Hart family, the star of the stage, the sun of the household solar system, the perpetual recipient of all maternal sighs of adoration, was Marissa. Of course it was. Marissa was the kind of daughter mothers in small towns loved to brag about, not because she achieved anything spectacular, but because she had the sparkle. And in many families, sparkle beats substance every time. She was loud where Evelyn was quiet, demanding where Evelyn was careful, needy where Evelyn was restrained. These qualities tend to attract parental attention the way shiny toys attract crows. So, naturally, Evelyn became the shadow. Not tragic, not abused in any dramatic Victorian way, just overlooked. The kind of child people forget to photograph at birthday parties. The one left out of the group chat planning Thanksgiving. The invisible daughter. And she made her peace with that, or at least learned to breathe around it, which is ironic considering her lungs had other plans. Evelyn was born with a chronic respiratory condition, something gentle-sounding but decidedly inconvenient, the sort of thing that required careful management, occasional medical visits, and more patience than most 20-somethings realistically possess. But she handled it. By herself, mostly, with the sort of calm discipline her family mistook for being fine. Her parents didn't mean harm, not intentionally. They simply adapted to the ease of assuming Evelyn didn't need anything, a dangerous habit, but an easy one. And so life rolled along that way. Evelyn quiet, Marissa radiant, the parents orbiting the golden child like a pair of well-trained moons. There was, however, one exception. One person who saw Evelyn not as the quiet one or the easy one, but simply as herself. Her grandfather, Arthur Hale. Arthur had that gentle kind of wisdom that comes from living long enough to recognize patterns, especially the less flattering ones. He watched the family dynamic with the same expression historians use when revisiting the causes of the 30 Years' War, a mixture of resignation and mild curiosity about how so many smart people could make such questionable decisions. He saw Evelyn. And he told her so. He called her his hidden gem, a line that would sound cheesy in any other family, but in hers felt like a small miracle. He'd always pause before saying it, as if weighing the words to make sure they landed softly. A man like Arthur didn't need grand gestures. His gentleness was the gesture. Evelyn grew up clinging to that subtle validation like a lantern in fog. But dynasties, even minor suburban ones, have a way of unraveling when the one wise elder holding them together takes his leave. And when Arthur passed, quietly, without Evelyn even being told how serious his decline had been, the Hart family structure didn't crack so much as crumble with tired inevitability. His funeral, if you can call it that, played out like a well-rehearsed performance. Marissa cried loudly enough to echo across the pews, the kind of sobbing that leaves mascara trails dramatic enough for a red carpet. People patted her back, offered her tissues, whispered how close she must have been to her dear grandfather. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat 3 rows back unnoticed, the way extras are placed in court scenes to fill out the ambiance. And then came the will. Or rather, the promise of it. Because on the day the funeral dust settled, Marissa strolled up to Evelyn with the sort of triumphant glow reserved for reality TV contestants who think they've won something forever. "I inherited pretty much everything," she said casually, like she was reciting a lunch order. "Grandpa left you, well, I don't know, something small. I'll let you know." And Evelyn believed her, because in families like theirs, the golden child's version of events always arrived pre-approved. But this story isn't about the will. Not yet. It's about the moment everything cracked open, the moment when Evelyn's body said enough, and her family said inconvenient, and the universe, in the form of a certain observant doctor, quietly took notes. It happened a couple of weeks after the funeral, when Evelyn's lungs staged a full-scale rebellion. She landed in the hospital, oxygen tubed placed carefully, nurses moving around her with the kind of practiced calm that makes emergencies feel like routine housekeeping. Her parents visited briefly. Marissa visited dramatically. And then she made a choice so baffling that even historians of dysfunctional behavior would need to sit down with a quill and diagram it. Marissa pulled out Evelyn's oxygen. Not by accident, not by fumbling. She did it with full, irritated intention, the kind of intention usually reserved for unplugging a phone charger someone borrowed without asking. "Stop exaggerating. You're not even that sick. You just like the attention." The irony, of course, being that Evelyn didn't even like attention. She simply liked breathing. The panic that followed was quiet but unmistakable. The flailing chest, the widening eyes, the way sound drained into a distant hum. But in that moment of suffocation, one person actually noticed. Dr. Adrian Cole. Calm, steady, quietly furious Dr. Cole. He walked in, saw what was happening, and reconnected the oxygen with the precision of someone who doesn't raise his voice, but absolutely documents everything. The next few minutes were gentle, but devastating. He asked Marissa to step outside. She argued. He didn't budge. And Evelyn watched, in that foggy haze between terror and relief, how a stranger defended her more fiercely in 5 minutes than her family had in 25 years. Later, Nurse Elena came in and whispered that this wasn't the first time Marissa had behaved strangely toward a vulnerable family member, that her grandfather's last days had been complicated, that someone, they didn't say who, had raised concerns. It was the first time Evelyn realized she wasn't crazy. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't imagining the imbalance. She was simply the only one in the family not invested in keeping the facade. And that's where we'll leave her for tonight in part 1. Lying in a quiet hospital room, oxygen gently flowing, the hum of machines steadying her breath, and the quiet dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible after all. Because someone saw. And soon, everyone would. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're listening in bed, go ahead and resettle your pillow. Maybe unkink your shoulder a little. Tonight, we're drifting further into the House of Heart, a dynasty built not on power or prestige or even competence, but on the time-honored tradition of pretending everything is fine when absolutely nothing is fine. Last time we left Evelyn in a hospital room, oxygen flowing, dignity partially restored, and the faint sense that someone had finally stepped into the mess with her. And that someone, of course, was Dr. Adrian Cole, a man with the bedside manner of a monk and the spine of someone who has witnessed one too many family disasters in the ICU. He had a presence that wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, just there. The kind of person you trust almost instantly, mostly because he doesn't seem particularly interested in being trusted. He was simply doing his job, which, unfortunately for the Hearts, included documenting medical sabotage. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's drift back to the days following Evelyn's incident. Days that moved quietly, gently, like thick snow settling on an empty field. Evelyn spent most of her time half awake, half processing, letting her thoughts swim in soft circles rather than sharp lines. The hospital can do that to a person. The lights hum, the white noise of machines creates a sort of lullaby, and the nurses glide in and out with uncanny grace. Nurse Elena Ruiz, for example, a woman who carried herself with the calm authority of someone who has seen generations of family dysfunction from bedside 1 to bedside 17. She wasn't dramatic, but she did have what we might call strategic bluntness, delivered in quiet doses. She checked Evelyn's vitals each morning, smoothing the edges of the oxygen mask with careful fingers, asking softly worded questions like, "Has your sister always been like that?" It was a fair question, and one Evelyn didn't quite know how to answer. Because how do you explain a lifetime of being second place in your own home? How do you summarize the quiet erosion of being the daughter who didn't need anything and therefore received nothing? Elena didn't push. She simply nodded as if she already understood the answer Evelyn couldn't voice. It was Dr. Cole who broke the silence first. Not with confrontation. That would be too jarring for this kind of story. Instead, he knocked lightly on the door frame one afternoon and stepped in with the sort of measured calm that comes from years of training and a personality that refused to escalate unnecessarily. He began gently. "Evelyn, I want you to know that what happened wasn't your fault, and it wasn't normal. Evelyn blinked at him, the tube at her nose giving a soft hiss, like it agreed. He continued, tone low, easy. I've filed a report, and I'm making a note of what I witnessed. It's part of your chart now, documented formally. Not dramatic, just factual, and devastating in that quiet, bureaucratic way that signals things are about to ripple outward. Evelyn could only nod. Your sister won't be allowed in the room again without staff present. You're safe here. Safe. It was such a simple word, one most people use casually. But being safe around her own family, that was new. That was a luxury Evelyn didn't realize she'd been missing. For the first time in years, she let herself exhale fully. Let's float forward a few more days. Evelyn stabilized, her breathing steadied. She ate actual meals instead of pushing food around her plate. She watched sunbeams crawl across her room from dawn to late afternoon. And as her lungs repaired themselves, something else did too. Her clarity. She noticed things she'd ignored for years. How she apologized before asking for water. How she reflexively minimized her pain. How she braced emotionally when her phone buzzed with a message from home. Patterns. Families are full of them, and some of them do not age well. On the morning she was discharged, Nurse Elena lingered by the doorway for a moment. She looked like she was deciding whether to say something. Eventually, she spoke, quietly, conspiratorially. "You're not alone in this," she said, "and you're not crazy. I thought you should know. There were concerns about your grandfather's last days, too. Concerns tied to your sister." Soft words, heavy implications, delivered in the tone of someone offering truth, not sensationalism. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the blanket. She didn't respond, didn't need to. Elena gave a slow, deliberate nod and left it at that. Some truths don't need elaboration. When Evelyn stepped out of the hospital into the chilly air, she felt disoriented, like someone who had been underwater for so long she forgot how sound worked on the surface. Her parents were supposed to pick her up. They didn't. It wasn't surprising, just painfully predictable. So she called a rideshare and let the driver talk about his cactus collection for 20 minutes while she stared out the window at the passing streets. It was all oddly soothing in its randomness. Back home, the silence of the house greeted her with the kind of emptiness you can't quite put words to. No welcome back dinner, no flowers, not even a glass of water left on the counter. Just the familiar chill of being an afterthought. But there was one message waiting for her. From the attorney handling her grandfather's estate. Reminder, will reading scheduled for next Thursday at 10 a.m. Attendance required. Required? That was interesting. Even more interesting was the follow-up message she received a few hours later. Dr. Adrian Cole will be in attendance. Evelyn stared at her phone for a long moment. It felt surreal, like watching a chess match she accidentally became the queen in. She wasn't sure what role the doctor played in all this, but she could feel the gravity of it. Because in Evelyn's life, nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever tilted in her direction before. And now the universe seemed to quietly nudging pieces into place. Not dramatically, not loudly, just gently, like snowfall. Let's drift toward the day of the will reading. Not rush, just float. Because this story isn't about drama. It's about the soft collapse of a long-standing facade. The morning arrived with overcast skies, which felt appropriate. Clouds hung low, fat with unspoken tension, the kind of weather that whispers, Something is going to shift today. Evelyn dressed simply, a soft sweater, jeans, nothing remarkable. She didn't feel like someone about to inherit anything, mostly because she'd been trained not to expect things. Her parents sat stiffly in the front row of the attorney's office when she arrived. Her mother gave a tight smile, the kind you give someone right after gossiping about them in the parking lot. Her father nodded once, distracted. And then came Marissa. She swept into the room with the breezy confidence of someone who still believed she was the center of gravity. She wore a designer coat that didn't suit the weather and sunglasses indoors because, of course, she did. She didn't look at Evelyn. She barely acknowledged their parents. The attorney cleared his throat. And in the doorway, behind him, stood Dr. Adrian Cole. Not looming, not stern, just present. Marissa blinked in surprise, the first crack in her perfect composure. Evelyn felt something shift almost imperceptibly, like a page being turned by a slow breeze. The attorney opened the folder. And this is where the quiet unraveling of the Hart dynasty begins. Not with shouting, not with slamming doors, but with the soft and inevitable truth finally coming to light. And tomorrow, in part 3, we'll drift fully into the will reading, the contradictions, the quiet shocks, the doctor's testimony, and the gentle but unmistakable beginning of Evelyn's revenge.